Many years ago, the gentleman that taught me how to renovate houses, flipping it is called now, gave me some advice. He said, "Don't let fools and women see your work until it's done." Not a particularly politically correct thing to say, but still good advice anyway. Not that I have taken too much notice of it. Thought I'd cleaned up all the dagger boards, but I've missed one side and I've taken a bit of a break. It's not really nice work. Trying to get all the blue stuff off. Yeah, I don't know if you can see it, but the epoxy actually does stick to the blue stuff, but it is also quite flaky. Over here, quite flaky. I've cut out of cardboard proper NACA profiling for the dagger boards here to make them a more efficient shape. They definitely have too fine an entry on the leading edge, so I'm going to use some PVC pipe to fix that. Quite happy with the way the boom is coming along. I reckon it's cool. Now, these things aren't so cool. The dagger boards, I'm sick and tired of reshaping them, and I'm thinking I'm just going to put a little bit more glass on there, seal them up with some epoxy, and get some paint on them and call them done. Well, believe it or not, we all make mistakes, and I've discovered that my boom is about 18 inches too short. So I'm scarfing on here an extra couple of pieces, scarfing at a 12-to-1 rate there. These go on like so. Then with some extra reinforcing and some extra fiberglass, I'm sure it'll be good. But no harm done, seeing that the longest timber I could get was 14 feet. There had to be a scarf somewhere. This has been rescued from the old boom. Took quite a bit of cleaning up, but now it's running free and good, so I'm using it. You might hear the music in the background. People up the hill there are playing one thing, and people over the other side there are playing another. Free entertainment. Dagger boards in theory are a really good idea and probably fantastic for racing catamarans with at least 2 people on board to take care of them. But for cruising people, well, especially for a solo sailor, whilst moving, trying to get them up and down, it'd be quite difficult because you need pressure off them to be able to get them up and down. But the other big problem is, as every cruising sailor knows, the ongoing problem is always barnacles and oysters and things growing. And if you have dagger boards and you pull them up and let some growth happen, then drop them down, well, this is what's going to happen. You get big gouges cut in here. And if you left your boards down, of course, they'd be stuck with oyster glue. I'm going to keep these dagger boards and try them out, but if they don't work out, I'm going to try something quite different. This is how local craftsmen do their fairing. Put on epoxy primer, which goes on pretty thick, and then sand it off, and if necessary, do it again. It seems to work quite well. Of course, as soon as I make a statement like that, someone comes along and proves me wrong. Gemma, who does work for my neighbour, working on his boat, while waiting for the tide to change, offered to micro balloon my dagger boards and my boom. And of course micro balloons fill in the gaps a lot better than just the epoxy primer. I guess I'll give this a sand and see how it's come up. The tides are not going to reach the main hull now for the next few days, so I've started fiberglassing over the work that I have done. This tide is not going to rise for another 14 centimetres maximum. 14 centimetres. Well, provided there are no waves, which is highly unlikely. This is stage one of the fiberglassing process, and I'm really glad to have made a start. The fiberglassing technique that I'm using, going off my does epoxy stick to paint test over there, what I do is I sand the area, wash it down with thinners, then apply a coat of thinned out epoxy, which I know is really going to stick. And then, before that is completely cured, I put on a layer of straight, thick epoxy. The epoxy I use is really thick stuff. You really got to push it around with a brush. It's hard work. After that, with the thick epoxy on, I take my sheet of fiberglass and pat it into shape, as you see there. Now it is cured, and I'm cleaning up the edges so that the next trick will be to put on a layer of thinned epoxy to take up any of the fiberglass which hasn't soaked up the resin. But this I found is the best way to do it. And take off the little knobs of drips, and it seems to work quite well. The tides are going to be touching the boat tomorrow morning, but I got a lot of work done in this run. Bit of cleaning up to be done on that one, and making a start on the starboard side here, and all that down there yet to go. It's been very time consuming working on the boom and the dagger boards and the hatches. This is the hatch for what was the chain locker right at the very nose of the boat. Looks pretty gross, doesn't it? Fiberglassing the main hull is now 3/4 done. Just this little bit down here to do. I'm going to end up covering up this piece of artwork. I call that the humpback dolphin. The epoxy that I'm using has an odd characteristic. There is a warning not to use thinners with it, though almost everyone does because it is so thick. Most people imagine that it reduces its strength, though my epoxy tests clearly show that that's not the case. And in fact, it helps a lot with adhesion. This is how thick the stuff is. If you can see that. What it does with thinners in is it makes it shrink, and if you let it pool or gap fill, it will actually crack. And if you use it with fiberglass, say in a situation like this, it can pull it right out. Pull it right out of the corner. And that's a bit of a disaster if you let that happen. Using this epoxy in a saturation technique with lots and lots of thinners, using it on the skin, it actually pulls it in a tremendous amount. And now I've got a big fairing job, like what happened here underneath this window. All that area was epoxy saturated, and now I've got to do a fairing job on it. It looks awfully messy at the moment, doesn't it? And you'll probably get a better idea of how much it's shrunken in the skin from this angle on this one. But on solid wood, it works fine. And I'm not at all worried by the fact that I poured in over 2 litres of thinned out epoxy into this area here. And it made it an awful lot stronger. And I don't anticipate any problems with it. So if I had my time over again, would I do it the same? Well, yes, I would. Everything I've done so far has been good and strong, though further epoxy saturation of the skins to avoid the distortions, I will be using in the future these expensive epoxies that I brought over from Australia. The boat is now about as gross and disgusting looking as it's ever going to be, so I'll video some of it for posterity, so to speak. Yeah, there's quite a bit of work here in the starboard armour. It's a nasty area down there. Okay, got a hole in the bed there. Got to get some plywood on there. Okay. Now, I never got to show you what's happened just forward of the mast. That's the roof, or the deck, that is new. It's come up quite well. I've got to put some strengthening pieces here and a hatch going in here. It's going to look a hell of a lot better. There's a hatch to go in there too, and be a bit breezier as soon as there's a hatch. We've got all this area here which is going to be chain locker, that I'll just coat. That now needs replacing. Yeah, and these floor pieces are not fitting properly, but anyway. And of course down here. Okay. Well, that's it for 7 months. Bye for now.